All right, we are live on Facebook. I am Brendan Evans. I'm the Executive Director of Leadership Lincoln. Thanks for joining us for another super timely topic with our hot topics. We're going to be talking about labor shortage day, but before we get started, just a couple of announcements and thank yous. Number one, for our hot topics committee that plans our hot topics discussions every month. And since the beginning of 2020, they've just really done a tremendous job in reaching out and thinking about topics that really are important to our community so people can have information that's important to their success, our community's success, and helping move us all forward. And we're excited to engage our alumni, and it's been great to be online and engage the broader community as well. So whether you're watching on Zoom or Facebook, or to engage our alumni, and it's been great to be online watching later, we're happy to have you here. Visit us on Facebook Live on Mondays and Fridays at noon, most times when we have youth programming or some conflicts, we may not be there to do Lincoln Leaders on Mondays and Fridays, community conversations. And right now we're getting ready to launch our application. So if you are interested in Leadership Lincoln, if you know of somebody who would be a good fit for Leadership Lincoln, just let them know that we're going to be taking applications soon, or send a nomination into info@leadershiplincoln.org. Again, thanks to all our board of directors, our committee volunteers, and our panelists today. And I'd like to introduce Fred Sekman, the chair of the planning committee, and we're excited to have him adding his experience and interest to our hot topics events. Please help me welcome today's moderator, Fred Sekman.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, everyone else that's watching on Facebook Live or joining us here in the Zoom. We're very excited to talk about this. My name's Fred Sekman with Union Bank and Trust. And also, I volunteer my time as a chairperson of the Hot Topics Committee. So today I'm gonna first start by kind of introducing our panelists. I'm going to give you some brief introductions of each of them. There's more details in the comments here on the Zoom in the chat, I guess, with links to their detailed biographies. So I'm going to go through and introduce all of them, although we're maybe one short here, so let's hope he joins before we get to him, but we'll adjust as we need to. So I'll start with Allison Hatch. Allison is Director of Workforce Development at Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development. Allison has over 10 years of experience in developing talent in Nebraska, working with LPED and the Nebraska Department of Economic Development. Next would be Sue Martin, President of the Nebraska State AFL-CIO. She's served in this capacity since being elected as the first woman president of the organization in 2015. Next, we have Bryan Seck. Bryan is the Chief Talent Management Strategist at Kawasaki in Lincoln. Prior to Kawasaki, Bryan was Director of Workforce Development for Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development and Prosper Lincoln Employment Skills Developer. And finally, we have Dr. Eric Thompson. Dr. Thompson is a professor of economics and the director of the Bureau of Business Research at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So I want to thank each of these panelists for joining us today. I think this will be an interesting topic. It's certainly one that in my line of work, managing the credit administration team here at UBT, I'm hearing from employers across every industry you can imagine, and here at the bank itself, we're experiencing these same kind of after effects now of this pandemic go forward world. So we're going to start today's presentation with Dr. Thompson, and we'll let him kind of go over a presentation he has to kind of set the stage for the discussion. As we're going along, if you have questions, please drop those in the chat. Laura's going to kind of help feed those to me, and we'll go over those at the end of everyone's time. So yeah, we'll let Dr. Thompson get going. And again, thank you all for being here.
I appreciate the opportunity to present to you, to the group today, a little bit about labor shortages in Lincoln and the US. So I'm a college professor, so I brought a PowerPoint, but I promise just to hit the high points here and not remind you of your econ class in college. So just talk a little bit background information, talk about the drop in the size of the labor force here in Lincoln, and then some national trends on labor force participation. In terms of my background, I have a general research and teaching background in urban labor markets. And also over the last decade, I've been working with the Nebraska Department of Labor, Nebraska Department of Economic Development, producing a series of skills gap studies for Lincoln, Omaha, as well as the micropolitan and metropolitan areas of the state. So had a chance to look at these issues. Now, those studies tended to focus on long-term skills gaps. So today I am going to focus on more on the current situation with the what many are terming a labor shortage. Okay, so what are some of the statistics? Well, if you compare the most recently available month, December 2021, back with December 2019, right before the few months before the pandemic began, Nebraska's labor force participation rate has declined by 1.9%. So there's very strong demand for workers right now with the economy. But another thing that's happening is fewer people are working. And basically what happened is in 2020, with the onset of the pandemic and throughout the year, and even a little bit in early 2021, participation rates dropped. And then since then, the rest of 2021, we really didn't see them recover much, although perhaps a little evidence of that in December, at least at the national level. So about almost a 2% drop in the labor force participation rate in Nebraska. Very similar, by the way, the national drop in the labor force participation rate. The situation is similar in Lincoln. You don't have you can't in a timely manner get a labor force participation rate value, but I can say that the labor force itself, the number of workers, did drop during that same period by about 1.2%. Plus, we've had a little population growth, although slower than it normally is. So if you put that together, the situation's pretty similar in Lincoln as it is in Nebraska, down about 2% in terms of the share of people 60 and over who are in the labor force and working. So fewer workers to draw from for sure. Now, there is no U.S. Department of Labor data on who is dropping out of the Lincoln labor force, but there is national data. I always like to say about 1 out of every 1,000 people in the U.S. live in Lincoln. So I think the national data should be somewhat representative of our metropolitan area. So here are some national findings. Here we compared calendar years, so the whole year of 2019 to 2021, not just December's. First thing, and this was surprising to me and I think interesting, there is no gender gap. So the share of the drop in the labor force participation rate actually has been slightly more for men than for women. But there are notable changes in participation rate drop by age. In particular, I guess what would be called in the modern world, since more people work past 65 now, kind of the last decade where work is common, 65 to 75, the labor force participation rate dropped by 2 full percent in that group, but it was smaller in younger cohorts. So if you look at the quote unquote working age cohorts, 25 to 64, participation rate only dropped about 1%, in some cases only about 2/3%. So, and actually participation rose for teenagers. So it's not an even thing. It's pretty similar for men and women in terms of who's leaving the labor force, but by age, it tends to be the oldest workers. Maybe that makes sense. They're nearer to retirement. The stock market is way up. Houses are worth a lot more, and COVID is most dangerous for them. So maybe there's a logic to it. Okay. But with so many people retiring, it's probably not feasible that we're going to get all those workers back. So in the years to come, the labor force participation rate may not fully recover to where it was in 2019. I would expect that over the next year or year and a half, we'll get about half of the workers that we lost. So we'll be saying the labor force has shrunk by 1%. Rather than 2%. We'll be able to say that in about a year's time. So that's pretty good. We'll be getting, in addition to our normal growth in the labor force, because people are graduating high school and college, we'll be getting another 1% back in the coming 12 months. So we should have pretty good job growth, labor force growth during the next year. But it'll still be true that there'll be pretty intense pressure on business to economize on labor, and we may even lose some individual locations due to a lack of labor, which are, both phenomenon we've seen in the last year or so. There's also the Great Resignation going on. That's obviously very challenging for employers. There may be some part of a silver lining in that. if people aren't just switching jobs to get a higher wage for the same job, although, I can't blame them for doing that if that's what they do. But if they're using this strong labor market to try to get a better job, a job that has more responsibilities, that utilizes more of their skills to earn more for those reasons, I think that'll be positive, and it probably means they'll permanently improve their earnings rather than temporarily. Another big thing that's been going on here is the labor. We haven't had as much job growth due to immigration as we've had in the past. Obviously, COVID has impacted that, but international immigration is down about 30%. So that's been another factor that's held back labor force growth. It's actually shrunk in recent years. Now, I do think that more balance should return to the labor market over 2022 and early 2023. So right now, it's a strong labor market for workers. Now, obviously, it's always better to be the employer than the worker, or usually better. But things have flipped a little bit more in favor of workers recently. I think it'll become more typical or more balanced in 16 or 12 to 18 months. I think longer challenges could persist for industries that pay modest wages. So those are my main points. So we can go to the next speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for kind of setting the stage here for the discussion, and we'll be back to you with some questions here. Let's go now. I think I saw Mr. Bryan Seck jump online here. So Bryan again is with Kawasaki, and so we're going to let him kind of share with us from the viewpoint of his role with a good-sized employer here in the city of Lincoln. And I also failed to mention when introducing Bryan that I can tell you firsthand he was part of the best class ever here at Leadership Lincoln. So thanks for being with us, Bryan.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I apologize that I came in a couple minutes late. As many of you can, I'm sure, empathize with, been back-to-back meetings, so it's fun times. But I'm really happy to be here, and it's pretty cool to follow Dr. Thompson. We've worked together for a long time. So from an industry perspective, many of you may have worked with me when I was homeless outreach for LPS or the Prosper Lincoln work or with LPED. Really what we're looking at is labor force availability. We're hiring 500 positions over the next 18 months or so. A couple hundred of those we've already hired. But what I'm seeing when I'm talking to people for entry-level positions, these are hourly positions, full-time with benefits, medical, dental, vision, all of that. It's about $40,000 a year to get started. What I don't see, I can tell you, are people who are unemployed. I don't see that. If you pull up any works, I think Dr. Thompson may have mentioned this too, we've got about 2,000 people in unemployment. There's about 16,000 jobs in the Lancaster County MSA. Everybody's already working. Really, what I'm thinking about is how to move people from part-time jobs to full-time careers. How can we think about helping people who are scratching by, maybe with 2 jobs without benefits, to come join us at Kawasaki? So there's a couple of different strategies that we're thinking about. One is, how do you convince somebody who doesn't have any manufacturing experience, has maybe never been in a factory before, whether they're 19 years old or 39, that they can come work here, that we'll train them. You'll make $18.10 an hour from day one, and you can be successful. So that is one of the biggest things, is to get that outreach and awareness out there. So we're doing some increased marketing. We've really increased our presence on social media. We're talking to all the CLCs, Good Neighbor Center, you name it. We're talking to those nonprofits and saying, hey, if you have clients who are looking for full-time work, this is a great opportunity. The second thing is we created a part-time shift from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. specifically targeted at parents. So imagine you're a parent, you drop your kid off at school at 8 o'clock at Belmont, you come work for us from 9 to 2, make that $18.10 an hour, you get 401k, you're done at 2, go pick up your kid up at 3. So we're really trying to be creative. And I hope everyone understands, and I certainly have learned, that in manufacturing, it is a big deal to change a shift. So our company is really committed to spending money to figure out how to make this part-time shift work. So we're also thinking about the population. So let's find the people who are underemployed, like parents who don't have daycare outside of the school hours. Third strategy is really making sure that we are focused on retention. So I am a good recruiter. I think I'll probably know 90% of the people on this call from one way or the other. However, I don't believe we can recruit ourselves to success at Kawasaki. We already employ 2,400 people. Thousands of people have worked here over the years. So really what we're thinking about is how do we retain the talented people that we already have, thank them for their work, value them for their work, grow them at this company so that we do not have to replace them if they do not feel valued and do not feel that they can grow. That's easier said than done. In every environment, there's only so many supervisors, there's only so many team leaders. So how can we value increase in knowledge? How can we value perfect attendance? How can we value a person who suggested a new way to do a product? So really, I guess what I would tell you is we're always hiring Kawasaki. It is a difficult time to hire people. We do external assessments. This is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet. It used to be that it took a couple weeks to get hired at Kawasaki. We've got it down to about 4 hours. So people come in, they do an assessment. If they pass that assessment, they do an interview. If they pass the interview, they do a physical and a drug screen, and I will offer them a job on the spot that starts in 48 hours. We do not play around because that's the speed you have to play to get people who are interested to come to work. Otherwise, they're just going to go work someplace else. So we have to be very smart on how we do that. And to be successful, I think you have to move fast. This is just a different environment. Kawasaki used to be an employer of choice. I believe we're an employer of choice. People just have a hell of a lot more choices now. So I'd be happy to talk more about this, but that's I think a fair summary of where we're at in our process here at Kawasaki.
Thanks, Bryan. That was really interesting. There were several things there that I hadn't heard, but that 9 to 2 shift, I think, is a great segue here into hearing Sue talk. And I think one of the things we've seen come up over the last 18 months, I suppose, is this sort of that shift now to the labor force having maybe a little more say. And we've seen obviously some very public worker strikes and other labor negotiations that have come up, even here in the Midwest between John Deere and Conagra and some other large companies. So hearing what Kawasaki's doing, I think, is kind of a great segue here to hear Sue talk. So Sue, would you like to share with us maybe from your standpoint and the state AFL-CIO, kind of what the pandemic forward world has been like for you guys and what you're seeing?
Absolutely. So thank you, Fred, and happy lunch hour, everyone. So I really appreciate Bryan saying what he did. I love to see the strategies that Kawasaki is taking. So that's pretty encouraging. The labor movement sees the same workforce shortage issues, but what we're also seeing is a rise of collective action, like Fred said, around employment and working conditions. And this is evident through increased union organizing efforts and union strikes happening throughout the country. The pandemic has shed much needed light on working conditions and what's important to employees when balancing their work and life. Essential workers are tired of being thanked one day and then treated as expendable the next day. The headline isn't that there's a shortage of people willing to return to work. From our perspective, it's a scarcity story. We have a shortage of safe, good paying, sustainable jobs, and employees are starting to take action. Many are forming unions so that they can have a say in their working conditions, or striking and taking a stand against the inequality in today's economy. The service sector is where we're seeing the most worker shortage. Many are leaving low-paying jobs and seeking a higher-paying job or retraining to take a higher-paying skilled job. Our first responders and those in the healthcare industry have had to endure the most horrific working conditions throughout this entire pandemic. The lack of workers and the burnout have taken their toll. And I don't think that we can blame working people for reevaluating their lives and refusing to return to jobs that put their health at risk. I truly believe that the pandemic laid bare the inequalities of our system. Working people want safe jobs with good health care, flexibility, sick leave, and where they feel respected and valued. And they're now looking at work in a different way. And we're seeing this across the country with workers striking. We saw this directly in Omaha with the 11-week strike at the Kellogg cereal plant. These workers weren't just fighting for a decent wage, they were fighting for equal treatment and benefits. These folks were working 16-hour days, 7 days a week to keep cereal on the table for consumers. All the while, the CEO of Kellogg's took home $11.6 million in a total compensation package in 2020, which I want to point out is 279 times that of the median pay of a Kellogg's employee. Many say that workers are still sitting on the sidelines, and it's conceivably misrepresented that it's due to government assistance, which in fact it's not the case. The Bureau of Labor Statistics periodically does surveys to those not working and why they're sitting out. And the number one response is because of childcare or family responsibilities. So that's what's keeping the majority of individuals out of the labor force. Here again, shows that workers are reevaluating their work and life balance. So I thank Leadership Lincoln for inviting me to the discussion today and to provide a worker's perspective on the workforce shortage issue. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Fred.
Thank you, Sue. So before I go to our last panelist, I'd wanted to just again let everyone know that after we finish up here listening to Allison, that we're gonna ask our panelists to answer some questions. So please drop some questions into the chat, and Laura and I will try to get those facilitated as we move along here. So, all right, let's hear from Allison to kind of share with us a little bit about the challenges that Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development has seen over this time, and kind of the things they're working on to better our community. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Leadership Lincoln, for inviting me. So I had a lot of points to speak on that have already been said, and so I would echo a lot of what has already been shared. Childcare was one thing I was going to bring up, so thank you, Sue. One thing that I have seen that hasn't been brought up exactly per se yet is the I guess evaluation by employers to whether or not entry-level positions or their positions require a bachelor's degree or higher. And so I think there has been that evaluation of skills and degrees needed for positions. And I think opening up positions that traditionally required a bachelor's degree to more skills-based does allow additional people to be included in candidates. And so I think that opens up the door for refugees or immigrants who have, are coming with skills to add, but not necessarily the correlating degree. So that's just one thing that that I hadn't heard yet be brought up that I wanted to mention that we've seen. So I'm in the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development, and two of us are really focused on talent. And so between Kaylee, my counterpart, and me, we focus on everything talent attraction, retention, and development. But I categorize that into kind of three areas of work. And so we cultivate the talent ecosystem through conversations and events. So we're bringing people together. I would say we also are building connections between employers and the community members and businesses and case managers. We're also telling our story. So we're coming at the labor shortage from all sides, including marketing, including networking. A few of the things that we're specifically doing, my counterpart, Kaylee, she hosts an Expanding Talent Pools series, and that is to invite employers into conversations to consider additional ways of recruiting people who may not be currently considered candidates. And so that could be refugees, immigrants, formerly incarcerated individuals. And so we're bringing subject matter experts in to have conversations with our businesses to let them know how they can be targeting additional individuals, have people who have maybe been out of the workforce for a while, how can they help them transition back into the workforce? So that Expanding Talent Pool series is a really, I guess, a good example of something that my counterpart does. Something that I work on with Bryan Seck actually is the Lincoln Manufacturing Council. And so this started with Bryan when he was in my position. And so Kawasaki, Bison, and TMCO chair this council, but it's made up of 15 manufacturers across town, and everyone is working together to I guess our first priority is to increase the number of people who have interest in manufacturing and skills in manufacturing to enter the manufacturing pathway. So the one of our outcomes is a class that was created. And so we currently have a class, and the class is 6 sessions that are foundational skills for manufacturing. We market this out to case managers in town, so that the people that we're, I guess, attracting into this class are a little bit, you might say, like kind of pre-vetted, but they're showing high engagement in the class and high interest in manufacturing. We reduce their barriers, so we provide a meal and we provide childcare, and we talk about the benefits of manufacturing, and we try to reduce that stigma. And so that is just one example of something that we're doing to help people explore maybe a new career pathway that they haven't explored before, and to get into manufacturing. I mentioned that we work with case managers quite a bit, and that is through a collaboration called EmployLink, or Employ LNK. And so it's a collaboration. We have almost 1,000 individuals on our listserv. About 35 of us meet monthly, and we talk about what's happening in Lincoln for case managers and businesses. We can speak as one voice when we go meet with businesses, so that as, for example, when I go to meet with Bryan at Kawasaki, I can tell him that I'm going to be sharing this with my case manager colleagues. And so I then come back to the meeting and I can talk about what I've learned about Kawasaki and what Kawasaki is doing and who they're looking for, starting wages, whether they, would consider a formerly incarcerated individual, those kinds of things. And then the case managers can take that back to the individuals that they're working with. And so it really helps to speed up communication between businesses and individuals looking for work. I have a really great example of Paramount Linen. They talked to someone at the Center for People in Need one day. We met as EmployLink the very next day. She mentioned that they were looking for drivers. Later that day, someone was meeting with someone from Equus, and he said, I know Paramount Linen is hiring drivers. That person went to Paramount Linen later that day, was hired to start 2 days later. So communicating what we're learning when we're meeting with businesses can happen quickly and efficiently through this EmployLink. So those are just a couple of things that we're doing, but really we have a wide variety of ways that we're trying to support the talent ecosystem in Lincoln.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. Something that we've seen in some of the comments and questions already that Allison hit on, I wanted to maybe bounce back on. Bryan, Seck, you kind of heard Allison talk a little bit about immigration and the addition of those folks to the labor force. Is that something you're actively targeting? Or are there any special programs or things you guys are doing out there to look for those workers?
Yes, I'm so glad. I was sitting here taking notes as people were talking, and I was like, oh gosh, I didn't even talk about new Americans. So yes, so here at Kawasaki, we're right about 16 languages spoken on the floor. About 40% of our workforce on the floor are female, which I think a lot of people might not guess that it would be that high, about 42%. We're also, in a very positive way, we have more Latino folks by percentage on our floor than we do in the city. We're about 20% Latino workforce, also significant numbers of Vietnamese, certainly Japanese visitors, but also increasingly people from Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's when we think about refugee arrivals to the United States, some people are coming over as engineers. And some people are coming over and speak English, and some people are coming over from here, from there, who don't speak English. So basically what we did is we created an English language learner assessment for people who come and want to work at Kawasaki. If you speak zero English, we can't have you work at Kawasaki yet. It's not safe. There's too many things that happen. There is metal that is hot. There is electricity running through wires. There's a lot going on the floor. So what we did is we worked with Lincoln Literacy to create an assessment. And then if people pass at a certain level, we're able to get them hired. And if people, because that tells that they know enough English to be safe. Then the next step is if people pass right at that lower end, we actually offer English language learner classes taught by Lincoln Literacy that specifically teach manufacturing language. these happen on Saturday mornings, and people get paid overtime to attend those. So, people make $18 an hour to start. So we're paying people $27 an hour to learn very focused manufacturing English. We just completed our pilot class of 10, and now we have 10 more. So basically, we're going to go forever with 10 people in these classes working with Lincoln Literacy. So I hope what everyone hears is that we're trying to be creative in the way that we're able to employ new Americans. I can't look you in the eye and say, we'll take all comers with no English. That's not possible, but we're absolutely willing to work with people who have working levels of English, and then we will work with you to grow. We actually just finished a marketing video, and one of the people who spoke is one of the Bosnian folks who came over in the mid-90s, and she's now a team leader with us and really talked about her journey from starting at Kawasaki, not knowing hardly any English, just enough to get by, to where now she's a team leader and supervises like 20 or 30 people. So we will make it work.
Excellent, Bryan. That's a really interesting program, and really fantastic that Kawasaki is rolling that out and partnering with folks like Lincoln Literacy.
Yeah,
Dr. Thompson,
really
I know you had a slide where you kind of mentioned immigration and that impact on the limiting the growth really of the potential labor force. Would you maybe have any insight? I know there's been kind of a shift with the previous presidential administration. Immigration dropped significantly, and then we've kind of thrown the pandemic in here, which has also limited those numbers a little bit. Would you want to maybe touch on that topic and its implications on our state and local labor force?
Well, I think there's a significant opportunity that in the coming years, of course, I'm focusing here on legal immigration, should return to more historic levels, which will contribute to more of a normalization of the growth in our labor force. I think that is certainly a positive for employers, increases the options that are available in terms of hiring when the labor force grows more quickly. So I think that part of it will normalize here, as will the labor force participation rate. So I always try to emphasize that I think the current situation is somewhat transitional. Hopefully there'll be some long-term changes, and people have talked about how they'd like to see the labor force change here today. But I think it'll increasingly remind us of the pre-2020 labor market as time passes.
Very good. Sue, did you want to kind of weigh in on this topic, immigration's impact within the labor force and what you're seeing in your organization?
Well, of course, all of our organizations employ immigrants, and especially large in the meat packing industry, meat and poultry packing industry. So I'm just really excited to hear the other presenters talk about the innovative way that they're making them more welcome. So I'm super excited to hear that. And I wish that more manufacturing would do that. So.
Very good. One question that popped up in here that I think probably would maybe best be addressed by Allison is, are there any issues in Lincoln specifically around public transportation and the accessibility of that, and the labor force addressing some of the job openings maybe?
I would say that yes, I have heard that. I can recall a couple of conversations. One was I'm currently trying to figure out transportation to our manufacturing class. We talk about reducing barriers for participants to attend the class, and that's an evening class. And I've been exploring options for that for tonight, actually. In fact, I have it on my to-do list right after this. And I think my best bet right now is to schedule a Lyft driver. So I'm currently experiencing that, and my participants are. Another conversation that I've been a part of is currently incarcerated individuals on work release looking for work and going to work. And I know that it is tough for them to find transportation that's accessible. A lot of them are dependent on family members to borrow the cars or to pick them up, or hopefully once they have been at their new job for a couple of weeks, they can, carpool with somebody else who they're working with. So, but it's tough to get into the workforce without transportation. for our work release individuals. So those are a couple of things. I do know that my counterpart, Kaylee Hogan-Schnitker, is now on the StarTran board, I guess. I don't know if there's an official name for that, but that is something that as a team we are, trying to learn more about and help be part of that strategy. So those are just a couple of examples, but yes, I think that more work needs to be done and explored in that.
Very good. Bryan, do you want to weigh in at all on that? I know, Kawasaki's kind of on the northwestern edge a little bit of the city as we grow a little bit more that way, though, and it becomes a little more in town with the new high school and all the development going along that corridor. But is that a challenge for you to attract people to come work at Kawasaki?
There's two answers to that. The first is, yes, we're on the edge of town. If we were TMCO, which is located right downtown in the shadow of the courthouse, it'd be easier. People bike to TMCO. Diane, Timmy, and I have talked about that before. I think that's just fantastic. You'd be very challenged to bike to Kawasaki, also because none of the paths connect to Kawasaki. So there's two answers. The first is, yes, it would prevent people potentially to work. You can get to first shift on the bus. The shift runs from 7 to 3:30, but that means you get here at like 6:15 a.m., which is quite a bit early. You got to get quite a bit earlier. And for second and third shift, you can either get to work on the bus or get home, but not both. So for StarTran, first shift is okay. It's pretty full. For the others, it's a challenge. The other piece that us being on the edge of town and not having a lot of bus service is challenging is when our families' cars break down. I've worked with families in poverty in Lincoln for the last 10 years of my life. And I know every dealership and mechanic in town who, if I go to AutoZone and buy the part, they'll install it for me for free, because it is so expensive to repair cars and families just don't have the money. So in a lot of other communities, maybe not a lot in America, but I'm sure there are some, if your car breaks down, you could take public transportation in its place. So a person who normally wouldn't be, but then that public transportation is the backup, the chances are excellent that that person's not going to be familiar with the bus route, maybe doesn't go by their house. So it's not only a person who uses it every day, it's also a person who would potentially need to use it because of a car breakdown, which happens all the time. I know there are some companies out there who do like bus share or a bus share, van share. There's like a team leader, more or less, who'll go around and pick up people. We've talked about that here. I believe that Smart Chicken does it, or Tractor Supply in Waverly, but it's not something that we've implemented yet.
Very good. Another topic that I think kind of maybe plays off of this is one of the folks in the chat commented on, maybe how the state changes, not just immigration, maybe from the international standpoint, but even the kind of rural urban divide and how that's been changing in Nebraska over recent years, which has been a pretty hot topic. I wondered if maybe, let's start maybe with Dr. Thompson to see if he has any insight on that split between kind of rural Nebraska versus urban, and maybe how some of the labor force challenges differ between the two.
Well, the labor force challenges are extremely difficult in rural Nebraska. So many parts of the state, the population is actually dropping. There's a significant amount of, there continues to be a significant amount of rural to urban migration within the state. So even though the state as a whole might lose people on net to other states, within Nebraska, Omaha and Lincoln and Kearney tend to benefit from migration. So I think that maybe is a little bit reversed right now because there's so much prosperity in the ag sector these days. So, for a lot of young people, they really are, when they're starting their lives, maybe they don't have as many responsibilities. They're focused on having, maybe a crude way to say it is they're focused on being rich, and they they want to pursue a career where they can be really successful. And right now is one of those times where agriculture does feel like you can do that. And so I think it's slowed the rural to urban migration a little bit at this moment in time. Now, when commodity prices get back to normal,
Looks like Dr. Thompson has frozen.
All right. Yep. I think Dr. Thompson froze up on us here. I wondered, Sue, if you would maybe comment on some of the differences you're seeing. I mean, I'm sure you have organizations you're dealing with that are in larger and smaller communities throughout Nebraska, and I'm sure maybe the needs of those labor forces and the wants of those communities maybe differ between those two.
Yeah, and we see a greater, well, and we're seeing a lot of rural move to urban areas, and we see with union, we see a lot more union density, of course, in an urban area rather than a rural area. Of course, it all depends on the industry too. We have more railroad out in the western part of the state than in the urban part of the state. So yeah, that's as far as but that's what we're seeing. We're seeing more people moving from rural to urban areas.
As you talk to those employees working in those communities, and you listen to their needs and their wants, and what they're kind of asking to negotiate with their employers, would you say there are any topics that are more hot buttons maybe for the urban folks versus the rural, or are some of these same issues the same kind of across the board?
Yeah, I would say the issues are the same across the board. Again, just reiterating the balance of work and life, the work and their life balance. That's a huge issue, and I think it's not so much. I mean, wages are a good thing, and we've got a lot of lower paying jobs, but I think also the value that employers are showing their employees will keep them there a lot longer too. So all that kind of ties into it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue. Dr. Thompson, we kind of lost you just a little bit there, I think, at the end of your thoughts on the rural-urban divide. And you talked about how folks maybe have switched back a little bit due to the lucrative nature of some ag opportunities in the current environment with commodity prices. Did you want to maybe kind of finish your thoughts there? I know we kind of lost you.
Oh, I would just say, unfortunately, those high commodity prices never last more than a few years. So I would expect, a year or two from now, it'll return to more of a normal situation, and we'll see more, we'll go back to our sort of normal pattern of rural to urban migration. For better or for worse, that's a pattern we see within our state.
Awesome. Thank you. Bryan, one of these questions name dropped you specifically, so I feel like I have to take it towards you. But this person's saying that they've heard you speak of the benefits cliff before, and how that can challenge some folks from moving into a certain job, sacrificing benefits they have today, even to get a pay raise because of the value of those benefits. You want to talk a little bit about how you're seeing that right now, and then maybe after that we'll kind of let Allison talk a little bit about that too, if she's kind of negotiating that with people.
Absolutely. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the benefits cliff refers to a certain amount of money that people earn before they get cut off from benefits. Specifically, there's three that are most affected in Nebraska. Food stamps, which is also known as EBT, Section 8, subsidized housing, and subsidized childcare, which used to be called Title 20, but now it's just called subsidized childcare. So all three of those are affected by a person's income. If you're thinking to yourself, what about welfare? There's no such thing as welfare in Nebraska. Welfare is a check that you get just for being at a certain low income. The only way to get that is if you're a refugee for the first 3 years, and a very limited opportunity if you're not getting child support. But basically, welfare doesn't exist. Those are the three services that low income people are really availing themselves towards and have the opportunity to use. So for many years, basically people hit the benefits cliff right about $17, $16 an hour, depending on number of kids, sometimes 18. Basically what happened is, after years of advocacy led by Nebraska Appleseed, the benefits cliff was moved. So we did not solve the problem, but we basically moved the post. So now the income rate is higher before those benefits are starting to get cut off. So therefore, a person who took a job from $12 an hour, say somewhere, to come to Kawasaki and make 18, the chances of them getting kicked off their benefits are pretty low. Again, I can't speak to exacts because it depends on the number of dependents. If a person has 8 kids, that's very different income cap than a person who has one. So just to be clear, I don't want anyone writing this down and be like, Bryan said this. If you want to look at benefits cliff information, Appleseed has a great summary of how the law changed. You can also look on, oh gosh, it's escaping me now, but DHHS has a website, you can Google it, that shows the summaries of the different benefits available and what those income caps are. So overall, I would say I feel comfortable hiring somebody at $18.10 an hour to get started, that they won't get hit by the benefits cliff, but they would say if they were like at 21, 22, it just depends on the person. But it's not an issue we solved. I want to be clear. We punted in a good way, moved the post down the line, but the post is still there. And because of inflation and everything else, we're going to run up against this again, and the legislature will have to take it on at some point in the future. I hope that was a relatively concise summary of a very complicated topic.
I think that was great, Bryan. Allison, is this something that you want to talk about, or if you're having discussions with employees or even other employers and how this comes up?
I would say it has come up, but not as frequently as I thought when I first joined my position. And so I don't have a ton to add. I think Bryan's summary was great. And I think that it is something that was talked about a lot around the legislation. And like Bryan mentioned, I think it will be talked about again soon as the inflation and pushes the need for additional income and wages. So, yeah.
Very good. Dr. Thompson, I kind of wondered, you've talked several times now about how you kind of feel like we're going to get to a pre-2020 level in hopefully the next 12 to 18 months, maybe. Are there some things that we can be looking at, whether that be economic indicators or just kind of some guideposts, as we're watching financial reports or economic data that comes out in the news that we all see, that you'll be looking for to kind of see when you think we're starting to see some normalization of the workforce and maybe some of that 1% coming back like you spoke of?
Well, the labor force participation rate is a big focus nowadays in those monthly jobs reports. So if you're following news accounts of the monthly jobs report, that's one of the key numbers they now report. So in December, this may just be a seasonal or temporary thing. We saw a 0.3% increase in the participation rate. So a significant chunk of our drop was reversed in 1 month. So that's something you can track. Immigration data gets reported with a bit of a lag, but if COVID continues its current trend and becomes less of a problem for our workforce and society, I do think that'll help a lot in improving the migration rates. So I think it's just a matter of patience. I think the other side of the equation matters too, what businesses do. So Bryan talked about some innovative things Kawasaki's doing. That'll be a big part of the solution too. Economists tend to assume that businesses will be innovative and solve problems. So we're expecting that to happen, but it's a lot of hard work by people like Bryan and his colleagues to do it.
Somebody just dropped a question here, Dr. Thompson, that I think ties into that question. So I'm going to kind of hit you again back to back here. And they were kind of asking, prior to COVID, if we go back to maybe early 2020, before the pandemic ramped up, there's some people talking about maybe a worker shortage anyway, whether that be the future baby boomer population kind of aging out of the workforce, or even just Nebraska, which is for quite a while now had a lower unemployment rate maybe than the nation at large. Is there still a larger issue about workforce to play out?
Yes, so the current conditions were laid on top of a long-term workforce and skills gap that we faced in the state. So, to me, it's centered around high-skilled manufacturing, things like information technology and computer-based skills, certainly high-skill construction work or some of the trades, blue-collar trades. And it's just been increasingly challenging to grow that workforce quickly enough. Sometimes because we're talking about new occupations, or in the case of things like electricians and carpenters, they're long established, good occupations to work in. It's just becoming increasingly challenging to get young people to go into those fields. Why that is, I think maybe some of the skilled blue collar jobs have lost a little bit of their wage advantage, not to other blue collar jobs, but to opportunities in the service sector, professional services. And also it used to be that, 30, 40 years ago, a lot of people had parents and uncles and aunts and grandparents that worked in the trades, and it was natural for them to go into that. Well, now if you look at the economy, a lot of people work in the services. And so it's harder for young people to see themselves in more of even a high paying blue collar occupation. They didn't grow up in it as much. So I think there's just some additional challenges in those industries these days.
Yeah, and Fred, just to reiterate that, what Dr. Thompson said, fast food places are bumping up towards $15, $16 an hour. We pay $18, $10. So, it's hard work. I won't lie to anybody. It's some of the line work. So when those wages get close like that, it's really challenging, even when we talk about providing full-time benefits. The second thing I would just back up Dr. Thompson on, and I promise I'm not bribing or taking payments from him to compliment his comments, is so much of the trades is familial. My family is like all law enforcement, right? Other families are like all military or all trades. So earlier I talked about helping someone understand that they can work in manufacturing without previous experience. That's such an important part of talent attraction for manufacturing and skilled trades, is that we can train you. And that's just a never-ending story of marketing, really. Anyway, just wanted to throw that in as real case things that I deal with every day.
Sue, I think we heard earlier, Bryan talked a little bit about some of the challenges they have in attracting people. And he mentioned daycare is one of those bigger challenges. When you're talking to your member organizations, what would you say are some of the biggest kind of complaints they have or challenges they have that they're facing in these manufacturing environments and other environments that you visit with?
I just kind of want to go back on you talked about the apprenticeship programs and getting people into the building trades. Not to change the subject or change your question, but we're finding that, we have a lot of the building trades that have these apprenticeship programs. They're getting lots of people still applying for those apprenticeship programs. Of course, each program can only take so many people. So I don't think that that's a problem. A problem that we have right now is, especially with the infrastructure funding coming in, we're going to have more infrastructure building going on, and it's a shortage of skilled workers to do those jobs. And so I think, it's not so much the apprenticeship and the training programs that are going to be an issue, but it's going to be having those skilled workers to do the jobs that are going to be created through this, through the infrastructure money that's coming in.
Very good. I know, Allison, you work with kind of connecting employers and employees and trying to help them find the workers they need, but you also work with the economic development department. And I know Bryan, of course, has done some of that too. But, having such a low unemployment base as our community is trying to attract new businesses into here, is that a challenge to try to sell our community if there is a worker shortage to new employers?
I would say it is a bit. But businesses are still expanding. So businesses are expanding. They are still looking for places to locate or expand into. And a lot of other areas are also experiencing labor shortages. And so we talk about the benefits that outweigh the cons, and we're really upfront about it. And so we know that if a business is talking to Lincoln about moving here or expanding here, they know our unemployment rate. We're not hiding it. And so it's part of the conversation. I think that one of the things that we are being really strategic about is bringing my role into those conversations more and more. And so I'm at the table talking about what we're doing with workforce development and talent development, versus the more traditional talent or business attraction methods where it's really, just looking at the sites and that kind of thing. So I'm part of the conversation more and more. We don't hide it. We talk about what we're doing. We talk about, what things Lincoln has going for it that would outweigh that. So it is a bit of a challenge, I'll be honest. Oh, and also I think traditional business attraction is it, the priority for business attraction isn't like it used to be. And so we are really invested in the employers that are currently in Lincoln. And so supporting their growth and their needs I think business attraction has kind of flipped maybe over the last 10 years or so from kind of that traditional like cold calling and just seeking like new businesses to land here. We're more invested in businesses that are already here.
Great. Something I've ran across working with our teams here at the bank that do mortgage lending or lending to new home construction has been some sort of, kind of migration from larger cities, particularly the West Coast. Is a story I keep hearing about a family that is relocating to Lincoln because now maybe one of the parents can work from home, and obviously the cost of living is materially less here. That's a story I've heard several times over the last 12 months. Obviously we have a quality of life we can kind of sell, but what are some other things we could do to attract these workers that we're going to need, whether that be the highly skilled trades or the IT that Dr. Thompson mentioned? I'd be curious to hear from any of the panelists what they see as trying to sell Lincoln to get these folks to move here.
I'm sure Allison will talk about what Kaylee is up to, and Lincoln the place to be, so I won't steal that thunder. But I will tell you that at Kawasaki we kind of draw about a 50-mile circle around Lincoln, and just like football recruiting, that's our turf. And so we are really thinking strategically about how do we reach out to smaller communities around us for people who want to commute in. We have a significant amount of people who come to us from Crete, Hallam, even though Monolith is there now, and a lot of the surrounding communities. So I think we're trying to kind of awaken the hibernating bear of marketing Kawasaki to for hourly folks beyond Lincoln's borders. I just saw Wayne put into the chat housing, absolutely. And if you really want to find a housing shortage, go outside Lincoln. There's no apartments in Crete, right? So at least we have some. But I'm 100% with Wayne on the need for additional housing. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet because I want to hear what other people say, is on the salaried side, when we're trying to recruit an engineer here, we actually, I can send the link if it's helpful. I don't have it with me. I'm on my phone. But we have like a wage calculator. So if we just attracted an engineer from Orlando and showed her like, hey, if you move here, the salary, I think it's like 10 grand less than what she was making, but here's your cost of living and all of that. And it's a pay raise for her in the end. So that's one thing that we use when we're trying to attract people from out of state.
Very good. Allison, I think you were going to weigh in next on that.
Sure. Yes. So, storytelling, telling our story is a big part of what my team does. And so, what we have is a marketing campaign called Place to Be, and the website is placetoblnk.com. And we really encourage employers to use this as a complement to their own marketing and attraction efforts. And so if you are trying to recruit somebody from out of town, talking about the benefits of Lincoln as they're considering the benefits of working for that specific employer can really help boost their success. So it's a campaign that has the landing page that talks about all these things that you can do and like benefits of living in Lincoln. It also has an email series, and so you can sign up. So if you're just maybe you moved away from Lincoln, but you still want to find out what's happening here, they are some of our best potential returners, right? I think the state is now calling those the roots returners for their recent campaign. So, but we're trying to attract them back to Lincoln as well. So there's a few things in that Place to Be campaign around storytelling and attracting, but we really do recognize the quality of life, the cost of life, the need for housing. Wayne, I totally agree. And what Bryan said, outside of Lincoln, it's even harder. And so LPED in general, like we're getting more and more into those conversations around housing and trying to address the issue from multiple ways. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. We're kind of running out of time here, so I just kind of wanted to let each of our panelists, if they have anything else they wanted to share that maybe I didn't get around to asking or didn't come up in our comments that that they wanted to kind of share on behalf of us, kind of their role that they wanted everyone to know about. Sue, did you have anything from your standpoint that we didn't get to that you think is important for everyone to know?
I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to join in the discussion and for having me. I think that Lincoln is a wonderful place to live. I actually live in Lincoln, and it's exciting to see some of the innovative ways that these businesses are trying to attract and retain employees. And so that's super exciting to hear that. So.
Excellent. About anybody else? Anybody else have something they want to share with the group before we kind of let Brendan wrap us up?
No, I just wanted to say thanks. I hate when people say no, I don't want to say something they do. I just did the thing that I hate myself. So good job, Bryan. I just wanted to say thanks for the opportunity. It's really exciting that we're doing all this hiring at Kawasaki and terrifying at the same time. So I'm always happy to hear from Allison and Sue and Dr. Thompson. And I took a bunch of notes during this. So I hope it was helpful to people on the call, because it was certainly helpful to me. So thanks for the opportunity.
There was something that I didn't bring up that I meant to, and it is that there's a lot of conversations statewide and in Lincoln about internships and talent development. And so that topic didn't come up today, but I just wanted to let you all know that is something that a lot of us on this call are invested in. And so more to come on internships and talent development.
Yeah, I think that can be incredibly helpful, certainly for college students. If there's more internship opportunities here, often people hire where they interned or work where they interned after they graduate.
Dr. Thompson's saying that because he has a whole cadre of interns that make him look really good every year. Very smart young people. So that's why Dr. Thompson likes interns.
The students here are great.
Yeah, no, they're wonderful. I say that in all seriousness. And Kawasaki has 7 or 8 interns at any given time, but we're looking to grow that. So all joking aside, internships are wonderful.
Awesome. So on behalf of everybody, again, I wanted to thank our panelists. This has been a great discussion and really insightful in a lot of ways. So I'll let kind of Brendan wrap it up and let everybody know what else Leadership Lincoln has going on. And thank you everyone for being here.
Yeah, thanks everybody. That was just such a great discussion. I think it's just top of mind for so many people, and there's so many different kinds of stories that are being told about why this is and how many people are employed, whether there's enough worker or enough jobs or what compensation is. And I think that discussion provided a lot of clarity, and that'll be recorded on our Facebook page. We'll eventually get that up to our YouTube channel as well. So if you didn't have a chance to watch it, or somebody didn't have a chance to watch it, you can direct them towards that and they can check out this conversation. Our next hot topics will be March 9th, and we'll be having a candidate forum with a broad swath of Lancaster County candidates for legislature. And that'll be just moderated, and everybody will have a chance to kind of give a taste of who they are. Location to be determined at this point. Hopefully with COVID rates decreasing, we can start to do more stuff back in person again, and we look forward to that. Again, if you know a young leader in high school, don't forget about Youth Leadership Lincoln. Kids who are freshmen this year in 9th grade. Our Youth Leadership Lincoln cohort is made up of 10th graders, so they'll want to keep a lookout to apply for it. And we love to get youth from all of our schools, not just our public schools, but all the schools in the county. And it just really makes that cohort special in the diversity of ideas that are there. Again, thanks to our committee, thanks to our board of directors, and thanks to our panelists today. That was a really great discussion. And hopefully we'll see everybody March 9th. All right, live stream.